Margaret Thompson, 58, had always believed that family meant inclusion, communication, and shared joy. Until the getting card statement arrived that would shatter every assumption she'd held about her relationship with her only daughter. The visa statement lay spread across my kitchen table like evidence in a crime I didn't know had been committed. $18,450 in charges over the past imprint 6 weeks. Riverside Country Club, $8,200. Bella Vista Catering, $5,650. Premier Floral Designs, $2,800. Each line item felt like a small betrayal, but together they painted picture that made my hands shake as I reached for my reading glasses. Confiscated that night down the neat columns, my morning coffee growing cold as the truth settled in my stomach like a stone. These weren't random charges. They had a pattern, a purpose. They told the treasurer of an event, a significant, expensive event, that someone had planned without bothering to include the person paying for it. When my daughter Emma had used my emergency credit card to plan what could only be her engagement dinner. The daughter who hadn't mentioned she was even seriously dating anyone, let alone engaged. The daughter who called every Sunday to chat about work and weather, but somehow forgot to mention she'd found someone worth spending her life with. I picked up my phone 3 times before setting it down again. What exactly was I supposed to say? Congratulations on your engagement that I learned about through my bank statement? The hurt was too fresh, too sharp for conversation. Instead, I walked to the window overlooking Maple Street, watching Mrs. Peterson tend to her roses in the early October morning. The suburban Chicago neighborhood was just beginning to stir, coffee brewing, garage doors opening, the familiar rhythm of a Tuesday that felt anything but ordinary. My reflection stared back from the glass, showing a woman who'd spent 30 years believing she'd raised a daughter who valued honesty and family. The gray in my brown hair seemed more pronounced suddenly, and the lines around my green-und eyes deeper. When had I become someone so easy to exclude? I thought about calling Robert, but my ex-husband would probably just make some comment about Emma finally growing up and handling her own affairs. He'd never understood the difference between independence and isolation, between privacy and deception. Camouflage cut through my spiral of thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Emma standing on my end porch, car keys in one hand, a coffee cup in the other. She looked radiant in the way young women do when they're in love and don't know their world is about to shift. "Morning, Mom," she said as I opened the door, her voice carrying that particular reclaimed lightness that meant she had news to share. I was in the neighborhood and thought, "We need to talk," I said, stepping aside to let her undo. Something in my tone made her pause, the smile flickering like a wind. "Is everything okay?" I gestured toward the kitchen table where the statement waited. "You tell me." Undermined. This face went through a series of expressions, confusion, recognition, and finally, a kind of trapped animal alertness. She set her coffee down carefully, as if the wrong movement might shatter something irreparable. "Mom, I can explain. I'm sure," I said, settling into my chair across from her. "Start with why I'm learning about your engagement from a credit card bill." She winced. "How did you— I was going to tell you. Wanted it to be special, a surprise. The dinner was surprise to be—" Wildfires. She trailed off, perhaps realizing how hollow her words sounded. A surprise. I repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Yes, I'd say mission accomplished. Knee reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. "Mom, please, let me explain. J-Cat proposed last month, and I wanted to do something beautiful, something memorable. The country club has this gorgeous private dining room, and I thought if I could remember something really special with my money. I was going to tell you before the dinner. I was going to invite you, of course. I just wanted to get everything arranged first, make sure it was perfect. I stared at her, this young woman I'd raised to be honest and thoughtful, and wondered when she'd learned to such elaborate justifications for simple theft. "When is this dinner, Emma?" "Saturday night, this nickname Saturday." "Mom, I know how this looks, but I was going to call you 35, I swear. I wanted everything paycheck to be confirmed first." "Get out." The words came out quieter than I'd intended, but they hit the air between laying. "Mom, get out of my house. Go plan your perfect evening with your fiancé that I've never met. Celebrate your engagement that you kept secret. Just do it with someone else's money." Emma's eyes filled with tears, the kind that had always foreground my resolve when she was younger. But 30 years of motherhood had taught me the difference between regret and manipulation. "I'll pay you back," she whispered. "Yes," I said, standing and walking to the crimson window so I wouldn't have to watch her cry. "You will." Her things, the soft sounds of retreat. Or she paused. "Mom, I love you. I never meant for it to happen this way." I didn't turn around. "No, Emma, you never meant for me to find out this way. There's a difference." Gold closed with a psycho echo through the house long after her car disappeared down Maple Street. I spent the rest of the morning in a strange state of numbness, moving through familiar routines while my mind tried to process what had just happened. I did laundry, cleaned the bathroom, deadheaded the mums on the front porch. All the small domestic rituals that usually brought comfort, but today felt hollow. By noon, the shock was crystallizing, testified into something sharper. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculating variety that my grandmother used to call dangerous. The kind that didn't make noise, but got things done. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the credit card account. One by one, I called the vendors listed, trembling on the statement. "Riverside Country Club, this is Jennifer." "Good afternoon, this is Margaret Thompson. I need to speak with someone about canceling an event scheduled for this Saturday." Let me transfer you to our entrenched coordinator." A pleasant male voice came on the line. "Mrs. Thompson, this is David. I understand you need to make some changes to Saturday's dinner. I need to cancel it entirely. The charges were made without my authorization." There was a pause. "I see. Well, let me pull up your account." "Yes, I have the Thompson reservation federally here. However, I should mention that our regazation policy for events with less than 72 hours notice, the charges were fraudulent," I said calmly. "I'll be filing for gas and a dispute with my credit card company and providing documentation that I never authorized this event." Crimson. Pause. Longer this time. "In that case, Mrs. Thompson, I'll need to connect you with our manager." The manager, a woman named Carol, had the kind of voice that dealt with difficult situations regularly. She listened to my explanation without interruption, asked a few clarifying questions, and then surprised me. "Mrs. I have to say, this is highly unusual. Your daughter seemed very excited about the event. She mentioned it was a surprise for the family." "What?" "Yes," I said dryly. "It certainly was that." "I understand this is a delicate family situation. Given the circumstances, we can process a cancellation, ? And refund 75% of the deposit. The remaining 25% covers costs we've already incurred. Poptable. Please send me written confirmation of the cancellation." By 3 o'clock, I canceled the catering and shedding and flowers as well. Bella Vista Catering was less accommodating. They'd already purchased specialty ingredients, but agreed to a 60% refund. Premier Floral had been the most understanding, perhaps because they dealt with wedding drama regularly. They felt like cutting a thread in an elaborate web Emma had woven without my knowledge. With every cancellation, I felt a mix of satisfaction, readiness, and sadness. I wasn't just undoing her plans. I was undoing the fantasy of a mother-daughter relationship I'd thought we had. My phone rang at 4:17. Emma.
Nia. Mom, what did you do?
Her voice was tight with panic, and I could hear Jake in the background asking what was wrong. I secured my credit card, I said, just like I should have done the moment I saw those charges. You canceled everything? Everything? I canceled the things I was paying for without my knowledge or consent. But Saturday, the guests, I already invited people. Then I suggest you start making some phone calls, or better yet, have Jake help you. I assume chained he exists and has a phone. There was a sharp intake of breath. That's not fair. No, Emma, it isn't fair. What's not Colonel's is using someone's money to throw yourself a party and not inviting them. What's not fair is lying by omission for months. What's not fair is finding out my daughter is engaged by reading a credit card statement. Silence on the other end, then quietly, I was scared. Of what? Of what you'd think of him, of us, of moving too fast. For a moment, my anger wavered. This was the Emma I remembered, uncertain, seeking approval, afraid of disappointing me. But then I thought about the careful planning those charges represented, the methodical way she'd Mina emergency card for weeks while keeping me in the dark. Being scared doesn't excuse theft, Emma. It's not, I wasn't, MX. What would you call using someone's credit card without permission? Another silence. Then Jake's voice, closer to the phone. Let me to her. No, Emma said sharply. This is between my mother and me. Apparently not, I said, since you've involved him in planning an event with my money while leaving me out entirely. I heard muffled conversation, probably Emma covering the phone while she and Jake argued. When she came back on the line, her voice had changed, harder, more defensive. Fine. I'll federally something out. But this isn't over, Mom. No, I agreed. It's not. When I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and tried to make sense of the day. The house felt different somehow, as if Emma's deception had changed its very atmosphere. 28 years of motherhood, and I'd never imagined could feel like a stranger in my own daughter's life. My sister Linda called around 8. I just got the most interesting phone call, she said, without preamble. From Emma. Crying. I closed my eyes. Let me guess, I'm the villain. She says you canceled her engagement dinner out of spite. Did she mention the part where she planned it with my credit card without telling me she was engaged? Linda was quiet for a moment. She left that out. I'm sure she did. Maggie, what the hell is going on? Emma's been engaged for a month and nobody knew? I filled Linda in on the morning's discovery and afternoon's phone call. By the end, my sister was making the combating small clicking sounds she'd made since childhood when she was trying to process something unpleasant. I don't even know what to call that, Linda said finally. I call it a wake-up call. You going to do? I took a sip of wine and considered the question. I'm going to teach my daughter that actions have consequences, and that families don't function on lies and stolen money. She's going to hate you. You doesn't trust me enough to tell me she's getting married. How much worse can it get? After we hung up, I walked through the house, checking locks, doing all the small things that mark the end of a day. In Emma's old bedroom, now my home office, I paused at the photos still hanging on the wall. Emma at graduation, Emma at her first job, Emma laughing at some long-forgotten. When had we stopped talking about the things that mattered? I thought about calling her, about trying to bridge the shields that had opened between us. But then I remembered the shock of seeing those charges, the careful deception they represented, and I knew that any conversation now would only make things worse. Some lessons couldn't be learned through discussion. Instead, I opened my laptop and began unborn everything. Screenshot of the charges, emails confirming the cancellations, a timeline of events. If Brushtma wanted to paint me as the unreasonable one, I'd make sure I had facts unreliable to back up my side of the story. Midpoint brought a text from Emma. We found another venue, a restaurant. Jake's paying. I hope you're happy. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I hope you've learned something. Didn't reply. Friday evening, Linda called again. I've been thinking about this all week. Do you want me to talk to her? No, I said. This is between Emma, me. But what if she doesn't invite you to the new dinner? I'd been wondering the same thing. Then I'll know where I stand. Maggie, I spent 18 years teaching. Emma, right from wrong. If she chooses wrong now, that's on her, not me. But lying in bed, flattened that night, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. Maybe Emma really had intended to tell me, to invite me. Maybe I'd let my hurt override my judgment. Then I thought about the systematic nature of those charges. Weeks of planning, multiple vendors, a significant financial commitment. Threatened, that wasn't the behavior of someone who'd forgotten to mention something important. That was the behavior of someone who'd made a calculated decision to exclude me from a major life event, while using my money to fund it. Saturday arrived, gray and drizzly. The kind of October day that makes you want to stay inside with tea and a book. I tried to follow that impulse, but my mind kept drifting to what Emma was doing. Was she getting ready for her dinner? Was she nervous? Happy? Did she think about calling me? At 3 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Thompson? This is Jake Martinez, Emma's fiancé. His voice was younger than I'd expected, nervous but determined. I unleashed know this is probably weird, calling you like this, but I felt like I needed to. I'm listening. Emma's been crying all week. I know what happened with the credit card was wrong, and I told her that. I offered to pay you back immediately, but she said you'd already canceled everything. I think his weight. The thing is, Mrs. Thompson, I love your daughter, and breastfeeding how much she loves you, even though she's too proud to admit she messed up. I know tonight's dinner doesn't mean anything if you're not there. To call me? No. She'd probably kill me if she knew. But I grew up without my mom, and I know what it looks like when someone's missing the people who matter. Emma's missing you tonight. Something in his voice, the earnestness, the slight accent, the way he stumbled over the harder words, made me believe him. What exactly are you asking me, Jake? I'm asking if you'd come to dinner tonight. Not to forgive everything that happened, just to meet me, to disarm Happy. I know it's not the fancy party she planned, but we're at Romano's on Clark Street at 7. There's going to be about 15 people, mostly my family and a few Satwords. I looked out my window at the gray afternoon, at the life I'd built in this house, where I'd raised Emma to be honest and considerate. Where I'd apparently failed, frustrations in some fundamental way. "I'll think about it," I said. After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, turning his words over in my mind. Emma was my mind. Emma was too proud to admit she'd messed up. That sounded exactly like my daughter. Smart, stubborn, and allergic to appearing vulnerable. I thought about all the times I'd waited for her to make the first move after childhood arguments. How many times I'd swallowed my own pride because I loved her more than I needed to be right. But this felt different. This wasn't about a messy room or a missed curfew. This was about fundamental trust and respect. At 6:30, I was still sitting in my discharged, wrestling with indecision. I was in the shower. At 6:55, I was in my car, wearing the blue dress Emma had bought me for Mother's Day, my hands shaking slightly as I started the engine. I told myself I was going to meet Jake, to size up the man my daughter wrenched to marry. I told myself I was the adult in this situation and needed to act like one. But the truth was simpler. I couldn't bear the thought of my daughter celebrating one of the biggest moments of her life without me, even if she'd chosen to plan it that way. Wainano's was warm and bustling, the kind of neighborhood Italian place that's been feeding families for 3 generations. The hostess led me to a private dining room in the back, and I heard the sound of restless and conversation before I saw anyone. Emma's back was to the door when I entered. She was wearing an emerald green dress I'd never seen before, her dark hair swept up in discharged twist. She was listening to an older woman, Jake's mother, I assumed, with the kind of Twitter attention Emma had always given to people she was trying to impress. Jake saw me first. He was shorter than I'd imagined, stocky and dark-haired, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like the kind of man who helped elderly neighbors with their groceries and remembered to call his grandmother every week. "Emma," he said softly, touching her arm. She turned, and for a moment her face was completely unguarded, surprise, hope, and something that might have been relief, all flickering across her features before her expression settled into careful neutrality. "Mom," she said, "you came." "Invited," I said, looking at Jake. "Thank you, 93, for calling." The room had gone quiet, 15 pairs of eyes watching our reunion with the avid interest people reserve for potential drama. Jake stepped forward, offering his hand. "Mrs. Sinks Thompson, I'm Jake Martinez. I'm so glad you could make it." Handshake was firm, respectful. Up close, I could see why Emma had fallen for him. He had the kind of steady presence that made you feel like everything would be okay. "It's nice to finally meet you, Jake." Emma moved closer, her movements careful and unchecked. "Mom, I'm glad you're here." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I nodded. "Congratulations on your engagement. I'm sorry I missed the proposal." Though a flush crept up Emma's neck. "I wanted to tell you. I was going to tell you, but you didn't." The careful neutrality cracked slightly. "No, I didn't." Jake gestured toward a chair that had obviously been left empty on purpose. "Please sit. I'd love for you to meet my family." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Jake's mother, Maria, was a warm, chattery woman who immediately Aki pulled me into a conversation about Emma's work at the marketing firm. His sister Isabel talked about wedding planning with the kind of enthusiasm that made me suspect she'd appointed herself maid of honor. His father, quiet and observant, asked thoughtful questions abruptly at the library. They were good people, the kind of family that made preserves welcome without trying too hard. And they clearly adored Emma, which went a long way toward softening my anger. But throughout the dinner, I was acutely aware of the parmations we weren't having. Emma and I spoke politely when directly addressed, but we didn't seek each other ad people, playing roles. Loving mother, dutiful daughter, while carefully avoiding the minefield between us. It was Jake who finally broached the subject, during dessert, with the kind of courage I was beginning to associate with him. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice carrying enough teammates to quiet the table. "I know this week has been difficult, and I know Em and I have making up to do. But I wanted you to know how much I love your daughter, and how much I hope you'll be part of our lives going forward." Emma, taking her hand. "I also think Emma has something she wants to say." Emma's face went through several expressions before settling on resignation. He looked at me directly for the first time all evening. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I used your credit card without asking. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Jake, about the engagement, about any of it. I was scared. Dredge. And I hurt you. And I'm sorry." It was apology, specific, honest, without excuses. The kind of apology I'd taught her to give when she was young and had done something wrong. "Thank you," I said. "I accept your apology." Relief flickered across her face, but I wasn't finished. "I marginalized you to understand something, Emma. Trust isn't just about saying sorry when you get caught. It's about making different choices next time. It's about including the people you love in your life, even when it's uncomfortable, asleep, or scary." She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I want to be part of your life," I continued. "I want to know treason, to help plan your wedding, to celebrate with you. But I need to know that you want me there, not just that you feel obligated to invite me." "I do want you there," she said, her voice small. "I want you there for everything. I was just afraid." "Of what?" She glanced at Jake, who squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Of you'd think of us moving so fast, of whether you'd approve of Jake, of changing our relationship, our Sunday phone calls, and Mitters being different." I felt something loosen in my chest. This was the Emma I knew. The one who worried about disappointing people, who tried to control outcomes, pragmatic bankruptcy. "Honey," I said gently, "I can't approve or disapprove, thereby I've never met, and our relationship is going to change anyway. That's what happens when people grow up and build their own lives. The question is whether it changes because we choose it together, or because you make decisions without me." She nodded, tears spilling over now. "I choose together. I want to choose together." His mother was crying too, and his sister was beaming like she'd personally orchestrated the reconciliation. Even Jake's father looked suspiciously misty-eyed. I stood up and walked around the table to Emma's chair. She stood too, and I pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home after a long, difficult trip. "I love you," I whispered into her hair. "I love you, and I want to meet your fiancé properly and hear about your proposal and help you plan a wedding that makes you happy. I love you too, Mom. I'm so sorry." We held each other while the restaurant buzzed around us. Two women who'd forgotten for a moment how to be family and were remembering together. Separated, Jake was standing beside us with a bottle of champagne and a grin that could have powered the whole building. "I think," he said, "we should toast to new beginnings." The rest of the evening passed in a warm blur of wedding talk and family stories. I learned that Jake was a social worker who specialized in helping kids age out of foster care, that he and Emma had met him at a volunteer event that he'd proposed in the Chung where they'd had their first date. I told them about my own engagement to Emma's father, about the small wedding we couldn't afford anything fancy, about how some of the best celebrations are the ones that focus on love instead of logistics. When it was time to leave, Jake hugged me like we'd known her for years. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said, "and thank you for raising such an amazing woman, even if she occasionally makes spectacularly bad decisions." Emma laughed, the first truly relaxed laugh I'd heard from her all week. "Flooring," she protested. "I'm standing right here." Good, I said. Then you can hear it Jake Martinez has excellent judgment, except for his taste in women. But she was smiling. In the parking lot, Emma walked me to my car while Jake said goodbye to his family. I really am sorry, she said again. Not just about the money.
I've been doing that for a while, haven't I?
I considered sugarcoating it, then decided we'd had enough them, Tess, for 1 week. Yes, I said, you have been. She narrated, absorbing the truth of it. I don't know why. I guess somewhere along the way, I started thinking that independence meant not needing anyone, not sharing anything. Independence, magical état, means making your own choices, I said, not making them alone. I want to do better. I want us to do better. Good. We'll start with Sunday dinner next week, both of you. I want to cook for Jake and hear more about your plans. Can I help cook? I know I'm terrible at it, but I'd like to learn. I'd love that. The driving home through I thought about the evening, about the apology and the relay reconciliation, and the way Jake's family had welcomed me like I belonged there. It hadn't erased the hurt of the past week, but it had put it in perspective. Han had made a terrible decision, but she'd also chosen to 110. She'd swallowed her pride, admitted her mistakes, and opened the door to something Betteridge's. That took courage, and it gave me hope for who Betteridge's becoming. At home, I poured myself a glass of Betteridge's and called Linda. How did it go? She asked immediately. Better than I expected. Jake's wonderful. Emma apologized, and I think we're going to Betteridge's. P.O.K. I'm so glad. I was worried you two were going to end up not speaking for months. We might have if Jake hadn't called. He's Betteridge's good for her, Linda. He makes her want better. Betteridge's. And Emma? How was she? I thought about my daughter in her green dress, nervous and hopeful, and trying Betteridge's so hard to make everything perfect. She was scared, I said, and young, and human. Sounds like someone I used to know. Yeah, I said, smiling. I suppose it does. Later, getting ready for bed, I found myself thinking about Betteridge's, the choices we make when we're afraid. Emma had chosen secrecy and control, thinking she could manage brushed eggs' reactions by managing the information they had. I'd chosen anger and punishment, thinking I could teach her debilitating by making her face consequences. Neither of us had chosen trust, the harder path that requires vulnerability and the risk of disappointment. But tonight, finally, we'd chosen each other, and then that felt like the beginning of something real.
My phone buzzed with a text from Emma.
Thank you for coming tonight. I love you, Mom.
Typed back, I love you too. See you Sunday. I turned off the lights and settled into sleep, thinking about Sunday dinner and wedding plans and the family we were still learning how to be. Outside, the October wind rustled through the trees, carrying the promise of change and the comfort of home. And for the first time in Abolish Both, felt like gifts worth.
Han. The credit card statement was still on my kitchen table the next morning, but it looked different somehow, less like evidence of betrayal and more like a receipt for a lesson learned. I folded it carefully and filed it away, not because I'd forgotten what it represented, but because I'd finally understood, taught us both. Some mistakes cost money. Some cost trust. The lucky ones cost both, and in losing them, help you find something worth treadmill more than either. The knowledge that love doesn't require perfection, just the willingness to keep them, one honest conversation at a time.